components. So I'm in the app component here, which again, it's just a function. And the app component is kind of like the base or root component that's going to have everything inside of our app. And one thing you may have noticed is that React components are just regular JavaScript files, but they end a little differently. They end with .jsx. And the reason for that is, you know how if we want to add any HTML to the page, we just write it in this return, right? And it'll show up. Well, just because this is still a JavaScript file, when React lets us write HTML on the page, they just gave this a new name called JSX. It's really just HTML, but because it's in a JavaScript file, they call it JSX instead of HTML. And it does have a couple of features that let us do some cool things because it's inside of a JavaScript file. So that's why they're all called .jsx. Now, one of the cool things that JSX lets us do is, because we're just in a regular JavaScript file, and this is just a regular JavaScript function, we can write any JavaScript we want in here and then add it to our HTML. So for example, I could just make a variable and call it like my name and put my name in there. Now, if I wanted to show this up on the screen, let's just make a div that says this app was made by Chris. Instead of like just writing out Chris here, we could just add it with JavaScript. So if we wanted to add something with JavaScript, all we have to do is write these squiggly brackets, and that just tells React, hey, I know we're writing HTML here, but this part is going to be JavaScript. So now we can just copy and paste our JavaScript variable in there, and it now says this app was made by Chris. So that's how that works. Super simple. We just write normal HTML. And when we want to add something with JavaScript that might be able to change as the user interacts with the app, all we got to do is write those squiggly brackets, and that just tells React, hey, this part's JavaScript. Cool. Pretty straightforward. So another cool thing that React lets us do is make our own components. So this is the component that just comes with React. It's going to hold everything that's in our app. So that's why they call it the root component. But we can make our own. So let's do that real quick. I'll just make a new file, and just to keep things organized, I'm going to put it in a new folder. It's called components. So I made my folder there, and now I'm going to actually make this new component file, which is really just another JavaScript file. So let's see, what can we make? Let's just say we wanted to make a nav bar that's going to be at the top of our app. So I'll just make a nav bar component, and I can name it anything, but I'm just going to call it nav bar so we just like know what it is. So I'll just make sure I call it .jsx, press enter, and in here we can make our own function for the component. So remember, the component is super simple. It's literally just a function. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll just make our own function, and we'll call it the name of our component, which we decided to call it navbar. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, the only thing we got to remember is usually when we make a component, we start it with a capital letter, but that's pretty much it. And that's it. There's our component. Now, the last thing we got to do is just export it so that we can actually use it. So let's go ahead and type export. Now, you may notice this default word, and the reason why it exists is just because you could export multiple things like, oh, here's some function that we made, and then there's, another function that we made or some, but React just wants us to export one by default. So that's why we use that default keyword. All right, cool. So let's just say what we want to export, which is our navbar component. And that is literally all we have to do to make a component. It is done. So granted, we probably want this to actually show something up on the screen. So we'll just type return and then those parentheses so we can add some HTML or JSX. So in here, let's pretend that these are some links. Just put p tags for now. So I'll just say home and contact us. Sure. So there we go. We got a component. And all we have to do to add it to our app is just back in our app.jsx file, just tell it where that new navbar component is. So to import, we just type import. And then our component, we called it navbar. And hey, look, it found it. We're just importing navbar from our file. That is it. We've imported it. Now we can use this anywhere we want here now. And it's super simple. It's literally the same thing that you've already been doing. Just like you usually will add another HTML tag, like a P tag, we literally can do the same exact thing with our component. So if we just type navbar the same way we make regular HTML tags, we can add our own component the same exact way. And that is literally it. So when I save, you see, hey, look, we have our navbar up at the top, the home and contact us shows up. Yeah, so that's basically how it works. It's super simple to make your own components. They're really simple. They're just functions and we can write HTML in them. And it has some cool features that allow us to easily just add JavaScript anywhere we want in the HTML or JSX. So in the next video, we're actually going to take a look at making our navbar look a little better by adding some CSS and also CSS modules in React. And we're also going to touch a little bit on how we might be able to structure our React apps to kind of keep them organized and kind of easy for us to work with. So hopefully that was helpful. If you'd like to support and allow me the time to think of ways to help others feel less intimidated by tech, feel free to check out the link below to my Patreon. And as always, may the odds be ever in your favor and the snacks be ever in your bag.